You've probably never bought anything from them. You've never walked into one of their stores, never seen one of their ads. You might not even know the name. And yet, right now, they are connected to a huge part of your life. Your retirement, your investments, the companies you use every day. Apple, Amazon, Google, Disney, Microsoft. So the real question isn't just what is BlackRock? The real question is, how did one company end up everywhere without most people even noticing? Look at the world the way most people see it. Companies competing, brands fighting for attention, executives battling for dominance, Apple versus Microsoft, Netflix versus Disney, Google versus everyone. It looks like constant competition, and on the surface, it is. But when you go one layer deeper, something strange appears. Because if you open the ownership records of these companies, something most people never do, a pattern starts to repeat. The same names show up, over and over and over again. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, different industries, different companies, same major shareholders. And that's where things start to feel off. Because now you're looking at companies that are competing while being partially owned by the same large investors. That doesn't mean competition disappears. But it does change how you understand it. Because suddenly, it's not just a battle between companies. It's a system. BlackRock didn't start as a giant. In 1988, it was a small firm in New York focused on something most people find boring. Risk, not growth, not hype, not big bets. Risk. Understanding it, measuring it, managing it better than anyone else. Its founder, Larry Fink, had learned a painful lesson early in his career. You can ignore risk until it destroys you. So BlackRock built its entire identity around one thing: helping institutions handle money more intelligently. For years, it stayed under the radar. Then 2008 happened. The global financial system collapsed, banks failed, markets froze. No one knew where the danger was hiding. And in moments like that, the most valuable thing in the world isn't money. It's clarity. Governments needed answers. Banks needed visibility. Institutions needed to understand their own exposure. And BlackRock had something rare. It could see the system. That moment changed everything. Because from that point on, BlackRock wasn't just managing money. It became part of the infrastructure of global finance. This is where most people get it wrong. When people hear that BlackRock owns shares in thousands of companies, they imagine control, like a traditional owner. But that's not how it works. BlackRock doesn't primarily invest its own money. It manages money for others: pension funds, governments, insurance companies, universities, and millions of everyday investors. That's the key. BlackRock isn't just a company. It's a system that channels other people's money into the market. So when you see its name attached to thousands of companies, you're not just seeing BlackRock. You're seeing the combined capital of millions of people moving through one structure, and that structure runs largely through something called ETFs. Sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Instead of picking one company, you buy a piece of the entire market. Think of it like this. Instead of betting on Apple, you buy a fund that already includes Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all together. Instead of choosing one airline, you buy the entire airline industry. Instead of trying to guess the winner, you own everything. That's why ETFs exploded in popularity. They're cheaper, simpler, more diversified, and require less expertise. For the average investor, they feel like the smartest move. And in many ways, they are. But here's where it gets interesting. When millions of people invest through ETFs, those funds automatically buy shares in all the companies inside that index. No preference, no bias, No picking winners. Everything gets included. So if an ETF tracks the S&P 500, it buys Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all at once. Now scale that globally. Trillions of dollars flowing into these funds. And suddenly, the same asset managers start appearing as major shareholders across entire industries. Not because they chose one company, but because they bought the entire system. This leads to something called common ownership. It means the same investors have stakes in competing companies, airlines, banks, tech giants, energy companies, and this changes incentives, not in an obvious way, but in a structural one. Because if one company wins by destroying another, the investor holding both doesn't fully win. They gain on one side and lose on the other. So the focus shifts from who dominates to how does the entire sector perform? No secret meetings, no direct coordination, just a system where incentives naturally align differently. And when incentives change, behavior eventually follows. And then there's something even more powerful. Aladdin. Despite the name, it's not a product. It's a platform, a massive financial system used to analyze risk, monitor portfolios, and simulate what could happen across global markets. Think of it like this. If the financial system is a city, Aladdin is the control room that maps traffic, predicts congestion, and shows where accidents might happen before they do. It can answer questions like, what happens if interest rates spike? What if a recession hits? Which portfolios are most exposed? Where is risk concentrated right now? And here's what makes it even more interesting. Aladdin isn't only used by BlackRock. Banks use it, institutions use it. Governments rely on systems like it. So BlackRock doesn't just participate in the market. It helps map the market. And that's a very different kind of influence. Because managing money is one thing, but understanding the entire system at scale puts you in a completely different position. So no, BlackRock isn't secretly controlling the world. There's no hidden control room, no master switch. But there is something more subtle. A system where ownership is concentrated, incentives are shared, and influence becomes structural. Not obvious, not centralized, but real. Because as investing became easier, cheaper, and more accessible, it also became more interconnected. And when everything is connected, power stops looking like power. It becomes embedded in the system itself. Not in one person, not in one company, but in the way everything is wired together. And maybe that's the most important shift of all, because the most powerful systems are the ones you don't even realize you're part of. If you want to understand how money, companies, and power really work behind the scenes, this is exactly what we break down here. Subscribe to Storica and tell me in the comments, what surprised you the most? ETFs, Aladdin, or the fact that the same investors are everywhere?